Many Bulls fans have some concerns about how the Bulls' new look offense is going to shake out, especially considering Billy Donovan is still the coach and with the specific talent that we have on this team. On today's episode, we'll take a look at the balance between Josh Giddey, Coby White, and Zach LaVine, and how it could work out looking at that comparative similar usage rates on other teams in the NBA. We're also going to talk about the things that Coby White needs to really do to step up next season and go into the mailbag. We're going to do all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. So I want to start off by talking about the balance that we need to strike on this offense, right? And I'm talking mainly about the starting lineup. I think you have to start there. The bench kind of is going to figure out where it does. But when you look at the Bulls' new kind of backcourt, right, as far as Josh Giddey, Coby White, throwing in Zach LaVine in that as well, as he's expected to start at the three, what's going to be the balance between that? And I got to give it up to, I think his name is Ball Family. He's a Ball Family stan that he was in the comments, and he talked about Josh Giddey's usage rate. Now, while he kind of built the usage rate around comparative to Lonzo Ball, we're not going to get into that part of it. But when you look at Josh Giddey, Coby White, and Zach LaVine's usage rates in some of their best seasons, right? In Josh Giddey's best season, that was the season that he averaged the 17, 8, and 6 nearly. He had a usage rate of 25.8. We look at Coby White last season, he had a usage rate of 23.2. That was the second highest of his career. His highest usage rate was actually his rookie year. And then you look at Zach LaVine, his best season, his best statistical season, which he averaged 27 points per game, he had a usage rate of 30.6, but he had an average usage rate of around 27 while playing with DeMar DeRozan. Now, how does that compare to the rest of the kind of teams that are top heavy in the NBA? Now, these teams all have bona fide stars on them, so I'm not necessarily comparing the caliber of players, but more so how the offense can balance out. When you look at the Boston Celtics, for example, Jason Tatum has a usage rate of 30, Jaylen Brown of 29, Kristaps Porzingis of 25. When you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, they had a usage rate. Ant had a usage rate of 32.2. Karl Anthony Towns at 27.4, and Naz Reid was surprisingly their third highest usage rate at 23.2. Then you look at the Pacers. They had their team had probably the biggest balance of usage rate. Now, some of this is due to like injuries and things like that. But last year, the Pacers actually had almost 5 players with a usage rate at over at 20. You had Pascal Siakam at 25.1, and this is his usage rate with the Pacers specifically, not his usage rate before getting traded to the Pacers. So with the Pacers, Pascal Siakam had a usage rate of 25.1, Tyrese Halliburton had a usage rate of 24.6, and TJ McConnell had a usage rate of 23.7. Ben Mathurin also at 23.3, Miles Turner at 23.3, and then also Jalen Smith, who's now a Chicago Bull, had a usage rate of 19.4. What that shows is that you can have a balance of, high usage rate players. Now, the Pacers are an interesting case because I don't know if Ben Mathurin was ever healthy. Why Pascal? I just don't remember off the top of my head. Jalen Smith kind of fell out of the rotation at one point as well. But then another team, the OKC Thunder. Now, this is a team that Josh Giddey came from, right? But when you look at them as well, they had 4 players with a usage rate over 20. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 32.7, Jalen Williams at 23.7, Josh Giddey at 23.1 last season, and Chet Holmgren with 23.6. They also had a bevy of players all around that 15 usage rate as well on that team. What that means is that, to me, especially when you look at the Pacers, who very similar to the Chicago Bulls, I don't think are going to have a very good defense. The Pacers' defense was god-awful, but their offense was able to just be a little bit better than their defense was bad. But, it comes down to you can have a bunch of high usage rate players, but you kind of got to play at a faster pace. And that's what you kind of got to look at, right? And I think when people, rightfully so, ask the question on, well, how is Coby going to work with Josh Giddey? And then you're putting in Zach, right? Josh Giddey's usage rates, which I want to make sure that I clarify. Usage rate is not just the amount of shots that you're taking in the offense. It's also how many possessions finish with an assist as well. So Josh Giddey's usage rate being as high as what it is, considering he also he's in the 90th percentile as far as open looks generated for teammates. There's a lot of possessions that end in assists with him, and that's why his usage rate's so high. And I think that's the key factor. And if this is going to work out for the Chicago Bulls as far as offensively, right? And we're not going to talk about, how many games they win or anything like that, but like there's a chance of that working out next season. It comes down to how you use them and put them in the right situation. You look at the Bulls, for example, last year, right? And this is why usage rate isn't the end all be all stat because, for example, the Bulls had 4 players last season that had usage rates of over 20. DeMar DeRozan at 25.7, Nikola Vucevic at 23.4, Coby White at 22.7, Andre Drummond at 21.2. But we know that Drum wasn't a huge part of the offense, right? That's why when you use usage rate, you also have to really factor in how that works. For example, Javon Carter had a usage rate. He was the 5th highest usage rate on the Chicago Bulls at 17.8, right? So usage rate isn't the end-all be-all number. And I also want to point out with that. But what I'm saying is that for people that are worried about how many balls there is, how much the ball is going to be spread around for the Chicago Bulls team, that's going to be the determining factor really on how this offense can work. And it comes down to the players figuring out a balance between those guys. Now, I've talked about before how Josh Giddey, the way that he generates open looks for his teammates, and then when you look at the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams hit the wide open threes generated at a rate of around 32 to 35%, whereas Coby White and Zach LaVine hit those same wide open shots at over 40%, there's a chance that it's gonna work out pretty damn well, right? So that's what you have to look at for as well. And it comes down again to how trusting Billy Donovan to find the balance of this team, and that is where the dangerous notion comes in at. I feel like Coby White and Zach LaVine both were playing with DeMar DeRozan over the last few years. They understand how to play with a player that's going to be ball dominant. Now, it can be refined from that, and I think Coby White's ability, which we'll get into Coby White a little bit more here in a second, but it comes down to those guys and Josh Giddey being the playmaker that the Bulls hope he's going to be. He has to be that in reality consistently, right? And so that also is going to help when teams try to pack it in on Josh Giddey if the players on this team are hitting their open shots. And so that goes, of course, beyond just Zach LaVine and Coby White. It also goes to Nikola Vucevic. It also goes to Patrick Williams if he's going to be in that starting lineup, right? That goes to those other players. You have to hit those looks that is going to be naturally generated. And the Bulls being 28th in pace last year, it just can't continue. If the Bulls are still 28th in pace last year with the high usage players that they have, it's going to fail. It will crash and burn, and it will be one of the more uglier offenses that you see in the NBA next season if they cannot figure out a way and a path to play consistently together and with a quicker pace. If they're not rebounding well, right, that means with Vooch, that means with Josh Giddey, that means with Coby White, who also averaged over 5 rebounds per game, that even Zach LaVine, who's been a solid rebounder at times. We're going to have a total team rebounding effort, and the rebounding, surprisingly enough, the rebounding, especially defensively, is going to be a big part of how the Bulls offense can work with having these players on it. That's a weird stat to use when you talk about offense working out, but it has to come down to that. Rebounding the ball well defensively, as well as if you can block some shots, which isn't the Bulls' strong suit as well, and naturally getting out on transition. If either Zach, Coby, or Josh Giddey get the defensive rebound and can start the fast break, that's going to be something exciting to watch, right? With the players that we have that can move faster. Not, God forbid if Mantas Bucelis is in there as well, right? So those are things that you're looking at. But I said that to say this. You guys know I always say you guys are as big a part of a show as anybody else. And so since that was raised up as far as the usage rate, I think that is something to also look at and say, like, and to kind of explain to people. Usage rate basically is how many possessions finish with you either shooting the ball, making the shot, well, free throws attempted, assist, or turnovers, right? That all contributes to usage rate. So it's basically how many possessions end with you doing something. It's basically doesn't track hockey assists, which I would love a stat to start tracking those hockey assists because I think that's a big thing as well going forward into the new ball movement around the NBA. But it is a stat that can help things, right? Help you kind of paint a better picture and a view of things. So it can work. But it comes down to how much of the players willing to sacrifice to make it work and how well the coaching staff has them ready and prepared to play a game where you may have to sacrifice a little bit of your personal game for the overall team success, right? And so let me say this, too. If this does end up crashing or burning as far as the usage rate, it isn't the worst thing ever if the Bulls end up keeping their top 10 pick, in my personal opinion. I know not everybody's going to agree with that, but for the Bulls fans that look at this and say, hey, this Bulls team can still win like between 35 and 39 games, there are those Bulls fans that believe that. For that to happen, we're going to have to play at a quicker pace. We're going to have to rebound the ball extremely, extremely well, especially considering it doesn't shape up that we're going to be a great defensive team anymore. But You never know. Team defense is a thing where you've seen kind of the weaker on-ball defenders, right? And I've talked to some people in the comment section that say things like, "Well, the Bulls aren't going to be that bad defensively. Miles Bucelis is better than DeMar DeRozan defensively." Not really. He does get more block shots, but block shots don't equate to better defense. There are a lot of things that go into defense: on-ball defense, off-ball defense, right? Jalen Smith is not as good of an on-ball defender as what Andre Drummond is. Weak side defense is okay, right? Those type of things. He's just not that. Also, the Bulls aren't getting the deflections theoretically right now with mentioned Javonte Green, missing Alex Caruso. So those things play into the fact of the Bulls still trying to figure out that balance, especially defensively. We'll see where they can be if Ayo, Patrick Williams, and if any other player really takes a step defensively. Coby, who's been a very active defender at times, if those things step up for the team, maybe our defense is good enough, right? Not saying that it's going to be good, but good enough to where if we are this high-powered offensive team that's getting out in transition and running, that we're able to really kind of counteract that, I guess is the best way to word it. But let me know what you guys think down below. Now hearing this kind of the usage rate, comparing that to some high usage rate teams that have multiple players that are in the 20s as far as high usage rate, the Pacers number kind of blew me out. Like that was crazy to me. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Now, with that said, one of the bigger pieces of this team, and we talked about him yesterday, is Coby White. And what and how is Coby White going to factor into this for the Bulls next season? He talked about stepping into a leader. What are the things that are going to make Coby White a better player overall next season on top of being a better leader? And part of that is how does Coby fit with Josh Giddey? That is something that I've talked a lot about this offseason because that is one of the most important things. Not to say that Zach LaVine's fit with Giddey isn't as well, but we kind of expect Josh Giddey maybe not to be with this team long term, right? We'll see what happens with Zach LaVine in that. Like, we know the Bulls are still trying to shop him. We'll see. But that fit between Giddey and Coby is going to be an important part. It's going to come down to how well can Coby still be an effective scorer with being off the ball, probably a little bit more even with DeMar DeRozan than he was with DeMar DeRozan. And that's a question that Coby White has to answer. But more importantly than anything, for one of the questions that are in front of Coby White this season is he has to answer, is he a star or is he just a damn good player? And that is a conversation that I've had with many Bulls fans over this offseason, right? People, when I talked about the Bulls lacking a star, people were saying, well, how can you say that Coby White isn't a star? Look at what he did last season. To me, I'm not going to take one season of a player being a star. John Salmons came to the Chicago Bulls team and averaged over 20 points, right, after we acquired him. He wasn't a star player, right? And so he did some things defensively as well. He stepped up majorly defensively when he had that fishtail thing that he was had going on. But it comes down to how consistently can you do it and how can you not be as streaky of a scorer as what you were before, as well as when you talk about the pre-All-Star break, the post-All-Star break, things for Coby White. That is a major question for Coby that a lot of people are looking at him, not just for the Chicago Bulls to help kind of determine where that franchise is going, but also for like how big of a building block are you for the Chicago Bulls? Are you a player that we can look at and say, if we get a true superstar, the star level player, that you can compliment them well and then we're off to the races? Or are you just a damn good player that you still want on your team, but you're not necessarily somebody we're building around? That is the biggest question for Coby White this season. And that doesn't just come down to the statistics either. That doesn't come down to Coby White averaging 24 over 19 last season. That comes down to the mentality. That comes down to stepping up in the big and in the right moments for the Chicago Bulls team. That does come down to some of the leadership, right? That is another big question for Coby White. When he talked about it, when he said that, and yesterday that we talked about and we played that clip of him stepping into a leadership role because of what he learned from DeMar DeRozan, how much of that is held true, Coby? How much do you truly look like that's like a star and that leader? How much are you being that vocal part? You don't have to get the most shots. You don't have to have the highest usage rate to be the leader or even the star of a team, but you do have to step up in the right moments. You do have to lead. You have to show these things. And so I'm not saying that I'm putting that expectation, because I think even if who Coby is now is going to be who he was last season, and he's that for the next 4 or 5 years of his career, that's still a damn good player in the NBA. But the question is how much does it up the ceiling for the Bulls if you can truly become a star? And that's the question that we have to ask. He has the personality. We've seen him on the court last year, like how many times Coby didn't back down from players. He drew charges, things like that. There was a point in time where he was leading the league in charges drawn for a point of last season. Coby has to continue now to lay out that air of sacrifice that we saw. Not only is he stepping into the role of a leader for like a DeMar DeRozan per se, but also Alex Caruso, who was a leader on that team, who was more vocal in communication, especially on the offense, the defensive side of the ball, right? Stepping up in the right moments defensively, sacrificing his body. doing things that stepped his game up. We're looking for Coby White to really be a lot of that. It isn't the end all be all, right? You want to see that from Ayo Dosunmu. You want to see that from Patrick Williams. Can you finally step your game up? But when it comes down to Coby White, the questions around him and the things that people are going to be asking for is, and as their game planner for Coby White, are you really like that? Are you just able to put up some numbers? Are you really like that, right? How do you step up? How do you show that grit, that determination, that fight that the Chicago Bulls are going to need heading into next season? That's what it comes down to for Coby White, and that's what I'm really looking for him for. And listen, Coby White already talking about Josh Giddey, understanding what he brings to the game, being welcoming to Josh Giddey is a big part of this overall as well. And we just got to see that continue to develop for Coby White. And I think the pairing between Coby and Josh Giddey can very well work. It can work. Will it work is a different question, and that's can only be answered on the basketball court. But also, how do you elevate the people around you, right? One of the criticisms around Zach LaVine is that he can put up numbers. He can be one of the more efficient scorers in the league. He can do all those things, but did he really ever elevate anybody around him? Whether it be motivation-wise, whether it be through his skill set, whether it be through his sacrifice, right? Those are things that we're now looking for Coby White to show that he can do, and that we're hoping he can. Now, if he can't, that doesn't mean he's terrible. That doesn't mean he isn't going to have a long career in the NBA. That doesn't mean that we're not going to want to see him stay around for the Chicago Bulls. But if Coby answers that question and becomes truly to that star that elevates the people around him and is that vocal leader, that really does change the tide and kind of put this Bulls rebuild on a different pace truly than what it was before, because you're doing it via one of your young players stepping up. And a lot of these players do respect Coby. Pat respects Coby. Ayo respects Coby. Dalen respects Coby. I'm not going to say anybody disrespects him, but like Julian Phillips, Modest Bucilis, like how they adapt to Coby White's leadership as he's trying to step into that role. And if he actually earns and thrives in that role, that is something that can change the tide for the Chicago Bulls. And so let's hope that can be the case, guys. Like I really, Coby White, once again, is coming into the season where kind of all eyes are on him. What do you do? How do you increase your game from what you showed us last season? That's going to be a big part of it. And I think Coby's ready to answer the test, but we'll see. Let me know what you guys think on that, man. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Bulls kind of cap situation going forward. There's been a lot of kind of talk around, are the Chicago Bulls, like how bad are they cap-wise? Could they even add to the team if they really wanted to? We're about to dig into that. But I wanted to look at the Chicago Bulls cap situation specifically because how much flexibility do the Chicago Bulls still have once the season starts if they need to make an alteration, absorb some money, whatever it really comes down to, right? Now, this was kind of especially brought about because of the flexibility that Ryan Poles always maintains with the Chicago Bears. The Bulls haven't always – it's harder to do that in the NBA anyway, right, to be up front. But everybody knows that the Chicago Bulls have hard capped themselves. So we're hard capped at the first tax apron, meaning that we couldn't even go into the luxury tax if we wanted to, which is, that's standard operating procedures for the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls right now have $9.6 million below the that first tax apron. So they're not as close up to that tax apron as some people have kind of communicated the Bulls to be. So right now, if the Chicago Bulls were to, example, create an open roster spot by, let's say, waiving Erno Lapatin, right, which he's non-guaranteed right now. I'm not saying that they'll do that, but if he does make the roster, it is what it is. Which I do think he will be, by the way. But that leaves the Bulls $9 million to use. Now, they don't have that in outright cap space, so they can't offer a $9 million contract to anybody. But they do have $4.3 million left of their mid-level exception, the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. So that means that the Bulls could theoretically, if they decide to cut somebody, or if they make a trade to where they send out more players than what they receive back and open up another roster spot, that leaves them about $4.5 million that they can use. Now, they can also absorb more salary back if need be to get any type of deal done. Now, as far as free agents out there, I don't really think there's any major free agents that the Chicago Bulls can look, except one. And that's if the Bulls end up trading a Torrey Craig or Javon Carter as part of a Zach LaVine deal and don't get as many players back, or maybe they do kind of waive on a lot of the team. Again, not something that I expect them to do. But one player to really kind of keep an eye out for that I think could actually fit a lot of what the Bulls need as well as an additional wing that can bring some things, that can play a little forward as well, power forward as well, but he mainly plays that small forward position, is Cedi Osman. And this is an interesting guy to look at because of what he can bring. When you look at as a starting small forward, he averages 15 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 3.1 assists, and that's per 36 minutes. Now, again, the per 36-minute number is not necessarily the best number to use as far as their actual impact, But then when you look at Cedi Osman and then what he's actually brought in the real stats, right? He had a 4-year stretch and averaging over double digits, shooting over 43% from the field and averaging around 35% from three. For his career, he's a 35.7% three-point shooter, taking 4.5 three-pointers per game. The last couple of years, he's been down with Cleveland, only 8.7. With Cleveland and with San Antonio, he split that between the seasons last year. 8.7, 6.8 points per game. Still has been a very durable player over the course of his NBA career. Last season, 72 games. The season before that, 77. 66 the year before that. The least amount of games that Cedi Osman has actually played is 59. Now, wing is a position that the Bulls don't necessarily, if we're getting quality play, you got Matas Busilis, you got Julian Phillips, you got Dalen Terry there. But if the Bulls were to look at something, if they didn't end up moving on from one of their veterans, Cedi Osman is a player I wouldn't mind the Bulls really taking a look at. Now, he doesn't solve any extra depth there at the forward position that a lot of Bulls fans want and to see us go after, but it's something to look at when it comes down to it as well. There are not a lot of really bigs out there that you can really take a look at, in my opinion, in this situation anyway. It's not a lot of those guys out there when it comes down to it, but that's just something to look out for if the Bulls were to kind of get a little creative, make a move. Of course, like Robert Covington's still out there, but a player that hasn't really stayed healthy. Marcus Morris is out there as well, a player that can play some power forward for you. There's a lot of 6'7" type players out there. Of course, Isaac Okoro is probably the best player still left out there, but a player that I don't expect the Bulls to be able, like nobody. Like the Cavs are going to match just about any deal he gets, and because he's restricted, you have to offer way more money than what the Bulls have available. So I just don't expect that to be something that the Bulls do, but we'll see. But overall, more so than any kind of free agent targets, this is more built around the fact that the Bulls have a little bit of space in there to get a little creative if they want to, whether it be in trades, taking more salary back, or they do cut somebody and end up signing somebody else in that. They got a little leeway to see what they can do with that. But we know this is Chicago Bulls. The roster's pretty much set. I think until either a Vooch or Zach LaVine trade goes down, pretty much set with where we're going to be at. But before we leave as well, the Bulls did sign E'Twaun Moore, former Chicago Bull, as a scout. Probably never hear his name again, but I do hope that the Bulls do put a really high focus on scouting and casting a wide net to see what they can bring in as far as some talent in here to really help this team kind of exceed. But other than that, that's my time for today, guys. Thank you guys so much. The mailbag episode is tomorrow, so make sure you guys get your voicemails, text messages, thoughts in. I'll tell you the number to send that into here in a second. You can follow the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.